The debate from the Bethesda community about where they wanted the Elder Scrolls 6 to be set was a debate that took place long before the announcement of the Elder Scrolls 6 took place at E3 last year. Some people want it in the Almeri Dominion territory, some want it just in Valenwood, some want it going to Black Marsh, some want it up in High Rock, and it's a debate that's gone long around, and it's kind of been restricted recently to those two continents. And it's been restricted, however, the debate to the two most northwesterly countries of Tamriel, High Rock and Hammerfell. This due to being a lot of theory crafted videos going around on YouTube and people deciphering that little bit of a teaser trailer that we got for Elder Scrolls 6, saying that it looks likely to be in High Rock or Hammerfell. And some people are debating, saying that they don't want it to be in Hammerfell because it's mainly desert, or they don't want it to be in High Rock because it's kind of a boring culture to be there. And I thought, I was kind of inspired to ask this question: does it really matter where in Tamriel the Elder Scrolls 6 is set? I thought I'd really restrict this down to Tamriel because I know a lot of people are saying they want the continent of Akavir to be brought in, but I think it's very realistic to assume that the Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be set in Tamriel. And I want to argue that in reality it doesn't really matter where it is set, because we've had Vvardenfell, we've had Cyrodiil, we've had Skyrim that have got really the full BGS treatment in a way, of being able to have a kind of handcrafted zone and dungeons placed where they want, while their dungeons could be, you know, procedurally generated, not the whole world is, not the whole world is procedurally generated like we got in Daggerfall, and that we got in Arena as well with the whole of Tamriel. And they're not like the Elder Scrolls Online kind of treatment to it, where they're accommodated to a multiplayer player base, so it's not as dense and not as well done as what we can expect with the Bethesda Game Studios treatment. And when it comes down to these countries, particularly Skyrim of the three, have been described in such a particular way that people had this kind of perception of what they were like rather than going there. Skyrim was described as a frozen wasteland before the Elder Scrolls Skyrim came out, before we got the teaser trailer, and you can go back and look at some of these old forum posts to this day of when Skyrim was first announced, of the hardcore Elder Scrolls fans, the hardcore Oblivion and Morrowind fans complaining, saying that it's going to be a poor world to look at because it's not in the lush, picturesque environment that we're used to in Oblivion. And when the teaser trailer came out, that kind of threw it all off wrong. And then when Todd Howard took us through the game several times before the game came out, it showed how beautiful Skyrim was and the creation they made. And while some argue that that was a law break, I have no issues with that. And I feel like that is something that why it doesn't matter where in Tamriel the Elder Scrolls 6 is set, because if you're breaking law to serve the game, I'm absolutely fine with that. We've heard these arguments before of how Hammerfell is predominantly desert. That doesn't mean that we can't get picturesque and great environments to explore and go around in that desert area. And there's also different types of desert to go through as well that we can see. Just look at Assassin's Creed Origins to see how different forms of the desert can look so differently in different areas, and how cities in the desert can work. And also we've heard it in Hammerfell through reading books and everything, that there's huge Dwemer cities underneath the great pits of sand that they've got there. So that means that really there's going to be a lot to explore, not only above the world but also underworld as well, which is something that the Elder Scrolls has thrived in more recently in the more recent games. And I feel that when it goes to go into these areas that are described in being a certain way, the perception that we have of that doesn't necessarily have to ring true, and breaking that law doesn't have to make it any way more of a complaint about how they've handled the law on it if it's done in favour of serving the game and making it a better game. Another example I can bring up is Black Marsh, where we've read that a lot of the areas that in Black Marsh are not being able to be habitable in there because there's such a dense swamp, and not only the other races apart from the Argonians can't travel in there. Does that mean that if the game is set in Black Marsh, if we do get a game in Black Marsh, we're not going to go to those areas? I highly doubt it. I can imagine there's going to be some areas of the swamp that are going to be kind of like dungeons in a way. Dungeon worlds open up if we ever get a game set there. I don't think it's going to be the next one due to that trailer that we got for the Elder Scrolls 6. But I do think as well that if we do ever go get a game there, it is going to be much more of an open area and a bit more of a different look than what we kind of perceive it to be. It's definitely going to have some of those swampy elements like Skyrim had the frozen elements, but we didn't. In Skyrim we did have the area around Falkreath, the lush forest or the great tundras around Whiterun and everything that made it a very different and diverse environment to explore and go around in. And I think that's exactly what we're going to get in the next Elder Scrolls game, no matter where it's going to be set. And also when it comes down to the lore of the area as well, that's something that they can expand on completely, because all we've read really, when it comes down to it, is just bits and pieces over the course of thousands of years of history in Tamriel. And going there, we're going to obviously have an understanding of what these cities are, we know where they are, we know what they're roughly going to look like, but so much time has passed that they can do so much to change the culture in a way, and really add more depth to a lot of these houses that we see, and a lot of these clans that we see in Hierarch in particular, and also expand on how the divide in Redguard culture in Hammerfell really works, and add more depth to it, and that could make it a much more interesting experience, because when you've just got minor details that don't sound that interesting, they can definitely, when you let them breathe a bit more and add much more detail to them, they can get a lot more interesting, a lot more intricate. And for us to go around and explore makes it much more interesting as well, because I'd argue that's exactly what happened with the Nords in Skyrim. They added a much more culture to it, put them into a setting of a civil war, which made it a lot more interesting to go through and play through as well. One argument that I can predict will happen in the comment section of this video, though, that I will agree with, that it does matter where it's set, because if it's set in Skyrim or Cyrodiil, it's not going to be a satisfying experience, and I completely agree with that. I will say that, however, that Vvardenfell is taken out of the equation of Morrowind, because we didn't get the full mainland of Morrowind in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, and Vvardenfell is very, very different now than what it was when we played the game. Apparently it's inhospitable, it's completely changed to the destruction because of the eruption of the Red Mountain, whereas Cyrodiil and Skyrim are going to be very, very similar to what we played in Skyrim in particular, unless there is a huge time jump into the next game where it's completely changed, and we hear about, a new piece of lore that's completely changed the landscape of it, kind of like how Tyber Septon changed the landscape of Cyrodiil in the second era. However, I do think, though, that when it comes down to going to these two places, I feel like we've explored all we need to do with Skyrim. We've been playing Skyrim for nearly 8 years now, and I feel that when it comes down to it, we don't want to go back there, we don't want to see there, we want to see somewhere new and explore somewhere new, and not see things that we're too familiar with in a way, due to there being such a long wait between the two Elder Scrolls games. And I'd say the same for Cyrodiil, and while Cyrodiil has definitely not been as played as much as Skyrim, when it comes down to the hardcore Elder Scrolls community, everyone has played them. Everyone in the hardcore Elder Scrolls community has played Oblivion, and we've experienced Cyrodiil, we've seen what it has to offer, and we want to go somewhere else and explore somewhere else as well. So I'd be more than happy to go through Morrowind again, because we haven't explored that mainland, and what we are going to see is going to be completely different. But for Cyrodiil and Skyrim, that's not going to be the case, and therefore want to go somewhere different. And I think that's the only thing that matters when it comes down to an Elder Scrolls game, is exploring what something new is. And that's kind of what exploring is when it comes down to it at the end of the day, is exploring areas and caves and dungeons that we haven't seen before.